Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sassy Pants, wife to Matty the rancher, and I'll be your storyteller today. Welcome to Adventures with Sodak Pete, stories that celebrate the hard work, big hearts, and wide open spaces of ranch life. Out here, every day's an adventure, and we hope each and every one of you listening can imagine yourself as little Sodak Pete, out here learning the ropes, getting your hands a little dirty, and helping out where you can. Grab your boots, tip your hat, and let's see what today's adventure has in store. Sodak Pete, Fixin Fence at the ranch. The sun peeked over the hills, shining on a brand new day of ranch work. I smiled and waved at Matty, Pete, and Millie as they headed towards the barn. Matty came back out of the barn with a shiny pair of fencing pliers. He held them out to Pete. "These are yours now, bud. A little big for you, but every cowboy needs their own pair." Pete's eyes lit up. He slid that heavy, red-handled pliers into his back pocket, just like Matty. They barely fit, and they even made his pants sag a little bit. But Pete, he stood tall anyway. He was so proud to have his own pliers. A bucket of staples, a roll of barbed wire, and the long fence stretcher were all loaded on Blackjack, that trusty old four-wheeler. Millie bounced right along, tail wagging. She's always ready to go. "Remember," Matty told Pete, 3 tight wires and strong gates. That's a good fence." With a rumble, Blackjack rolled out the yard, carrying Matty, Pete, Millie, and a whole day of work. Blackjack rolled along the fence line of the first pasture. Pete leaned over. His eyes were sharp, checking the wires just like Matty showed him. 3 tight wires and strong gates. 3 tight wires and strong gates," Pete whispered to himself as he was watching real careful. Matty slowed. A wire had pulled away from the post. "Hey, Pete, we're missing a staple here." He handed him a staple. He said, "All right, you set it on the post and you tap it in like this." So Pete grabbed the staple. He grabbed his pliers real tight. 1 tap, 2 taps, clink. Finally she grabbed, and the staple bit into the post, holding the wire real snug. "Attaboy," Matty said with a grin. "The first staple's always the hardest." Pete beamed. Not much farther down the fence line, Pete pointed. "Hey, Matty, that bottom wire looks kind of funny, doesn't it?" Matty walked over. The wire was sagged real low. The ends were curled loose right where it had snapped. "Good eye, bud. We've got ourselves a broken wire." Matty pulled the roll of barbed wire and clipped a fresh piece. "Here's how we fix it." Matty bent the old wire into a loop. Then he twisted the new piece of wire through it. On the other side, he made another loop. And then he hooked the two together on the fence stretcher, and he leaned back, and he pulled the wire real tight and real straight with a creak. "Your turn," Matty said. Pete twisted the wire with his pliers until it held real tight. When he was done, he slid the pliers back into his pocket. "Boy, these pliers are sure heavy." Matty chuckled. "That's how you know you've got some real working tools, Pete." By the time they reached the gate, the fence in the first pasture was fixed and the fence was strong. It was tight. Staples were hammered, wires were patched, and the gate held strong. "That'll do," Matty said, brushing off his hands. "Let's head back for dinner." Back at the ranch, I had dinner ready. Meat, potatoes, bread, and a cold milk to wash it all down. After they'd eaten, Matty filled a big jug of water and he strapped it onto Blackjack. "We're gonna need this afternoon, Pete." Pete grabbed his hat. He slid that big heavy pliers back into his pocket and he grinned. The biggest pastures were yet to come. As they rolled into the second pasture of the day, Matty pointed at a sagging spot in the fence. "See that, Pete? That wire's too loose. Those cows can reach through." He grabbed the fence stretcher. "This tool's called the Cowboy's helper. Tightens those wires right up," he said. Pete watched as Matty clipped it on, pulled the wire real straight and real tight. Then Pete twisted the wire with his pliers right through the loop. Sweat was running down his brow, but he didn't stop. They fixed the staples, patched the brakes, and stretched the wires. Each time that Pete slid his pliers back into his pocket, they felt heavier than the time before. 3 groups of cattle need fresh grass, and we'll have all 3 pastures fenced and ready before the day is done, Matty said. By mid-afternoon, the second pasture was almost done. At one gate, the latch hung loose. Matty lifted it, gave it a few turns and a few tugs, set it strong again, and off they went. Farther on, a post was leaning sideways. We'll have to come back and pound a new one on another day, Matty said, kind of making a note in his mind, remembering where that post was. When the last wire was stretched, Matty smiled. 2 pastures ready, 1 more to go, Pete. They pulled under a big oak tree. It was awful hot that day. Millie flopped in the shade while Matty opened the jug of water. Pete took a long, cool, fresh drink of water. And for a quiet moment, all 3 rested just for a bit before moving on. They bounced down the trail into the 3rd pasture, but this one didn't take long. The fence is looking pretty good, Matty said. Pete tapped in a loose staple and then another. Soon the fence stood straight and strong. When they got to the far gate, Pete said, "Nice! This gate looks tight and it doesn't even need any fixing." Matty and Pete both grinned. Pete wiped the sweat from his forehead. 3 pastures fixed, 3 groups of cows ready for fresh grass. Millie wagged her tail as they headed towards home, tired but proud of her boys. The sun was setting as they rolled into the yard and they put their tools away. The day's work was done. Pete sat on the porch step with Millie. Matty eased down beside him with a tired smile. "Good fences keep the cows where they belong," Matty said. "That's good for the cows and that's good for us." Pete leaned against Matty's shoulder, proud of the work he'd done and awful tired from the work he'd done. Millie gave a little sigh before resting her head too. I looked at 2 tired boys, a sleepy cowdog, and stars in the sky, and I said, "Thank you, Lord, for a good day's work, good fences, and good people." And under the evening sky, all was just right at the ranch. Thanks for riding along with us. Sodak Pete and I hope that you'll join us on our next adventure.